Krystal Everdeen, and today I'm going to show you how I crocheted the Sequoia halter top. And this is a design that's really different than what I normally do, so hopefully it's not too hard to follow along. I am using size 4 yarn from the brand Impeccable, as well as a size 5 hook. And we're going to start off by making a slip knot, of course, and then chaining to 3. For some reason I thought it was 4, but it's 3. We're going to chain 3. And then go into the very first chain to create this little like circle. And then inside of that loop that you just created, you're going to start making single crochets. You're going to make 6 single crochets all around. So slip knot, chain 3, then go back into that first chain that you created to make a loop, and then single crochet 6 times into the center of that loop. You're going to have this little circle like this. And after you've completed that first, let's call them rows. Every time that you go around the circle once, that is called a row, or we're going to call it a row. So after your first row of single crochet, then you're going to start making double crochets inside of the single crochets in the previous row. And a double crochet is yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over back through 2 loops, yarn over back through the last 2 loops. You're just going to continue making double crochets in the single crochets that you made in the previous row until you've completed this row. And the way that you'll know you completed this row is when you come across the very first stitch that you made in this row. So for this row we're making a bunch of double crochets. So once you come across the very first double crochet you made for this row, then you know that you've completed the whole row. And now it's time to start the new one. So for this next row, you're actually going to make 2 double crochets inside of 1 stitch, and then separate them with a chain. So go into the next stitch and make 2 double crochets. This is 1 double crochet, and then the second double crochet in the same exact stitch, and then chain 1. Do not skip any stitches, just go into the next stitch, create 2 double crochets, and 2. And then after you make your second one, you're going to chain 1, and then go into the next stitch, create 2 more double crochets, and then chain 1, and then continue with that pattern until you've completed that row. And I'm actually just going to clarify something before we move on to the next row. When you are chaining that extra chain in between the pair of double crochets, you're creating a gap. So that little gap is what I'm going to refer to for this next chain. So you see the 2 double crochets are close to each other and then there's a gap in between them. Well, for this next row, we're going to be working exclusively in those gaps. And what you're going to do for the first stitch is you're going to chain 3, and then you're going to go into the next gap available, and you're going to create 3 triple crochets. And after you've created 3 triple crochets inside of that gap, you are going to chain 1 and then go into the next gap and create 3 more triple crochets. And if you don't know what a triple crochet is, it is yarn over through the stitch, yarn over again, back through the stitch, yarn over through the first loop, yarn over through 2 loops, and yarn over through the last 2 loops. So you're going to create 3 triple crochets inside of that gap, and then you're going to chain 1, and then create 3 more triple crochets inside of the next gap, and continue with that pattern until you've completed the row. And your project should be looking something like this. Really cool, right? But not exactly like a flower, so we're going to start adding the flowery details right now. So after you've completed that row of 3 triple crochets, you're going to chain 5 and then slip stitch into the gap that you made in the previous row. And then you're going to chain 7 and then slip stitch into the gap that you made in the previous row. And then you're going to chain 7 again. And you're going to continue doing this throughout the entire row. So you're making just a bunch of loops around your project. And again, the gaps that I'm referring to are the areas in between the 3 triple crochets. So the areas that you made using the chain in between the triple crochets. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I mean, just looking at the project, you can tell that the 3 triple crochets are really close to each other, and then there's gaps in between. So go into those gaps with the slip stitch when you make the chains, And after you've created all these loops, you're going to create another row of loops. Same thing, 7 single crochets, and then you're going to slip stitch into the middle of the loop in the previous row. And then you're going to chain 7, and then slip stitch into the middle of the loop in the previous row, and you're going to do that for the entire row until your project looks something like this. So once you're at this point, you're going to chain 1 and then go into the next loop and create 8 triple crochets inside of the same loop. And the reason why we're making so many triple crochets inside of the same loop is to make a scallop, and you want a pretty good sized scallop, so anywhere from 8 to 10 triple crochets inside of this one loop will be good. I just decided to stick with 8 because I thought that was a good size, but if you want it bigger, then go with 10. Anything more than that, I think it's a little too much, but it's up to you. And this is what it looks like. After you've completed your triple crochets, you're going to chain 1 and then slip stitch into the next loop, chain 1 again, or chain 2 I mean, and then go into the next loop and make another scallop, aka 8 to 10 triple crochets inside of that one loop. And after that, you're just going to continue on with the pattern until you get something like this. So now it's starting to look like an actual flower, right? And it looks pretty and all, however, you are going to need it to be pointier, if that makes sense. You're going to actually need some points in there, and right now it's a little too round. So we're going to do a couple more rows to get this right. So the first thing that you're going to do for the next row is create double crochets all along the scallops. And once you reach the middle of the scallop, you're going to create 2 double crochets inside of the same stitch, inside of the same middle scallop. So everything else gets 1 double crochet except for the middle stitch in the scallops. And that's going to create a point. So after you've created those 2 in one stitch, then you're just going to continue on and create the double crochets inside of all the other stitches. And it should look something like this. Now you can see a little point. I mean, still not pointy enough, but it's getting somewhere. And after you are done with the actual scallop, you're going to slip stitch in the gaps in between the scallops, just so that it's more prominent, the differences between the gaps in between the scallops, and it just looks better. So every stitch is going to get a double crochet, and the middle stitch is going to get 2 double crochets, and then in between the scallops you're going to create a slip stitch and then continue on to the next scallop. So after that row, your project should look something like this. And now for the next row. For the next row, it's just going to be single crochet, basically the same exact thing that you're doing with the double crochets, but only with single crochet. So every stitch gets 1 single crochet except for the middle stitch in every scallop. See, 2 single crochets in that one. And then I'm going to continue on and make regular single crochets in the next ones, and then in this gap in between I'm going to make a slip stitch and then continue on to the next stitch with a single crochet. And after completing that row, then finally we have our little flower / star looking project, which is perfect. And now we have to add another row to be able to connect it to the actual top. So I'm just slip stitching my way to one of the points of this project because you need to start at the point. And after you've reached the point, you're going to chain 15 chains, and after that we're going to attach it to the next point. So let me just finish with my 15 chains. I don't know what number I am on right now. And eventually, okay, so after your 15 chains, you're going to reach over to the next point and attach that chain with a slip stitch. You're just going to create this little like bridge in between the 2 points, and then from there you're going to create another 15 chains and do the exact same thing. After you're done with those 15 chains, you're going to reach over, and let me just finish my 15 chains. Okay, you're going to reach over to the next point and then attach it using a slip stitch. And then you're just going to continue with that for the entire project until your project comes out looking like this. So once you reach this point in your project, all you're going to have to do now is go back on all those chains that you created using a single crochet, which isn't hard, it's just kind of tedious. But I feel that it really helps in the end because it's much easier crocheting inside of a single crochet as opposed to trying to crochet inside a chain. So take the extra time to do this step and have your project look like this. And after this point, we are finally ready to start making the actual halter top. So please be sure to tune in to part 2 where we will start where we left off here. And if you enjoyed this part of the tutorial, please give this video a thumbs up and also click that red subscribe button if you have not already so I can see you next time. Bye!